Waisili Summit in Phuket, and to the alumni in the audience, congratulations on your Waisili Summit in Phuket, and to the alumni in the audience, congratulations on your very impressive selection to participate in this summit, the capstone of the Waisili program. And I want to say thank you for your continued engagement. Waisili Waisili Summit in Phuket, and to the alumni in the audience, congratulations on your very impressive selection to participate in this summit, the capstone of the Waisili program. And I want to say thank you for your continued engagement and strengthening the relationship between the United States and also with Southeast Asia.
It's such a wonderful opportunity to bring these young leaders together to talk about sustainability, the theme for this year's ASEAN meetings. And one of the reasons we chose Phuket is because it is an example of what sustainability means.
this very strong sense of belonging with a lot of these folks that the YSEALI team has brought together here at these conferences, sort of sharing these core values for change and sort of be surrounded with like-minded people at the conference.
I learned a lot about how it means to be sustainability, how we could measure sustainable development, or how we could apply sustainable practices into our work and our study as well.
Exchange programs in the United States, regional workshops, a small grants competition, and events like the annual summit. And all of these activities really do is help to inspire and engage and empower with emerging young leaders across Southeast Asia.
Hi. Like you, many people think I'm just a young kid. Even if people think so, I can already see that there are those around me that need help. Not everyone has safe water, or access to education, or a good job, or awareness of the importance of protecting the environment. How can we help? There are challenges in this region that need to be addressed. It is not enough to go online and talk about the problems. We can do more. Join the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative, or YSEALI. YSEALI is a platform that enables young people like you and me to help solve the problems that we see in our region. The best part is that you are not alone. There are others out there who want to help. YSEALI is composed of young Southeast Asian leaders from Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Burma, Philippines, Laos, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. We can find solutions together. Backed by the United States government, YSEALI empowers young Southeast Asian leaders to address these challenges. YSEALI members have access to project funds, regional trainings, and U.S. exchange programs. So do you have a great idea to solve a problem in this region? Let's fix it together. Join YSEALI now, and let's make tomorrow an even brighter day. Register for YSEALI now.
All right, good evening everyone. Good evening sa mga Filipinos out there. Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat, and to everyone who is watching tonight's webinar. Welcome to GrowASEAN. This is a Digital Agriculture Fellowship and also an open access webinar series for those interested all about digital agriculture and digital technology for agriculture. And tonight still we are with Econcepto, an organization for economic literacy here in the Philippines. And again, we are still with one of the founders of Econcepto, Tisha Evite. I would love to introduce her again to you, everyone. Tisha is the founder of Econcepto, a youth-led initiative to expand economic literacy in the Philippines. She majored in development economics at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, where she earned the Best Undergraduate Thesis Award for her research in market efficiency of Bitcoin and currently serves as a financial analyst at the Philippine Department of Finance, in which she helps manage foreign loans and grants in various development projects, including green projects in climate change, agriculture, renewable energy, ICT, and infrastructure, among others. Before joining the civil service, she was part of the data science team of Coins.ph, where she provided business intelligence for the company that was providing financial windows for over 5 million Filipinos using tools like R, SQL, and BI platform. Together with Tisha, we also have Denver Buenaseda, who is a proud agricultural economist. He finished his undergraduate degree at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, magna cum laude. He was the recipient of the Best Undergraduate Thesis in Agricultural Economics in 2017. He has worked in the field of research, particularly on value chain analysis and market study. He also worked at the Department of Trade and Industry, where he served as one of the program officers of the One Town, One Product Philippines, a campaign that promotes goods and products of Filipino towns and provides funding for small businesses. He currently is a member of the Philippine Academy of Management, an instructor at the Department of Agricultural and Applied Economics at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and an economics contributor at eConcepto. He also runs citrusfix.ph, a social enterprise which supports calamansi farmers in Oriental Mindoro province in the Philippines. Without further ado, I would love to have them here in the screen. Pasok, Tisha, and Denver. Hi, everyone.
Hi, good evening. Thank you again for having us the second time.
Yeah, it's our pleasure to have you again tonight for our webinar. So before that, I forgot this. For our fellows, please comment down below your name for attendance. So Tisha and Denver, what are we up for today?
I think you're on mute, Denver.
Denver, you're on mute.
Okay, good evening, guys. Again, we're up for a workshop on data acquisition. So we will deep dive into data collection later.
All right. So di ko na patatagalin pa. I will give you the floor, actually the screen, to present your presentation for tonight. All right. Take it away.
And good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to greet our fellows, our friends from the ASEAN who are participating for this GrowASEAN Digital Agricultural Fellowship. Again, Tisha and I are from eConcepto. We are an organization that helps promote economic literacy, for every Filipinos. So let's proceed. So before we deep dive into the meat of the topic, I just want to have some starter pack, so just to level off our perspective with regards to data. So data is considered to be the new oil. As early as 2006, Clive Humby already mentioned that, and a decade after, The Economist, an international weekly newspaper available in print and online, also stated that data is considered to be the new oil. And now we ask, why is there an attribution like that with regards to data? We can see here that just like oil, data is also drilled. Okay, it is collected, and we also extract data, from different sources. Okay, maybe it's a primary source or a secondary source. We extract data. We also refine data. We also try to clean the data to make it more organized and easy to present. And lastly, we don't sell data, of course, but what we sell are possible insights, possible solutions to the problems that we face. So next slide. So for tonight, we will talk about the data collection process. For the first two objectives, I will be discussing that in detail. And for the third and fourth objective, Ms. Tisha Evita will explain that to you. Next slide. Okay. So first, let's look at the top view, no, of where we are going through. So we try to take it first, no, at the top view where we can see that the data is sort of processed. Okay, it undergoes transformation. So from data, it is transformed into information. Okay, into insights, and lastly to imperatives. Now, for us to easily visualize that, let us take an example. So, for instance, I am a farmer. I am a tomato farmer, and I have a 1 hectare of land. Now, come harvest time, I want to record the volume that I sell to my buyers, and of course, the sales. I will be collecting or recording the sales as well as the price. And from that, I can also collect or compute for the revenue of my tomato farming. Now, if I collect that on a day-to-day basis, or if I collect that into a monthly basis, I can consolidate that. Let's say I put that in an Excel, or I put that in a record book, simply. Now, that particular consolidation of data, transforms the data into information. Okay, once the data is stored, into a single repository, now that transforms data into information. Now, what can I do with that particular information? So, from that information, I can put it in a graph, try to visualize that as what we have learned in the past meeting. We can observe for the possible trends and patterns that are emerging from the stored information. And from that, the data is now transformed into insights. Okay, that information earlier is now translated into insights. And finally, what do we do if we are able to observe an insight? For instance, I have observed that my price of tomato is peaking during the rainy season. So, given that particular insight, what can I now develop? What business decision can I now undertake? So, you can see here the transformation of data. Next slide. Another example would be the GDP growth rate. Okay, this is a time series data from the Philippine Statistics Authority. Now, when you try to plot the GDP growth rate, quarter on quarter, we can see that we are now experiencing a recession. Okay, a recession by definition is an economic contraction, for 2 consecutive quarters. So we can see here that we have faced, or we have suffered, a 16.5% contraction in our GDP for the second quarter of 2020. Now, given that particular trend, given the trend, what are now the possible courses of action that the government can implement, or are they implementing already? So we have experienced we already received that there is the Bayanihan 1 and 2 that were enacted. Another question would be, are they enough? So that's a separate topic. But these are the imperatives. These are the courses of actions that we take based on the insights that we produced, and that insight is actually from a data that we collected. Next slide. So in this particular slide, I'll just present the most common types of data that we use in agricultural and applied economics. So here I stated in my slide there are 2, the production also and the marketing, data on production and marketing. Now let's go first to the data on production. So for production data, we can see here the 2 types of data, costs of production, and you also have the revenue. Now let's explain more on the costs of production. when you talk about the costs of production, you consider the fixed, no, and variable costs. So going back to my earlier example, no, I have a farm, a 1 hectare farm, no, that I devote for tomato production. So that is my fixed cost. No, I have that particular land. If I don't own that, I have to pay a fixed rent. So that's a fixed cost, no, that I incur. And also I have variable costs, no, because I have to pay for, let's say, the labor. Okay, and labor is actually dependent on the level of output that you are trying to achieve. Okay, so as you try to increase your production, your variable costs also increase. Okay, another types of costs, no, under the costs of production are your implicit and explicit costs. When we talk about explicit costs, these are your cash costs. Okay, these are the cash that you pay. No, let's say for buying a fertilizer or buying a particular equipment that you need for your business. These are cash costs. Okay, and at the point of view of an accountant, no, only explicit costs are recorded. But using economics, no, using the lens, no, of an economist, we also try to value the implicit costs. Okay, these are your non-cash costs that you incur in the production of a certain commodity. So whenever you employ your family, no, as one of your laborers, and then you don't pay them, no, there are still implicit costs associated with that. So one example of implicit cost is unpaid family labor. Okay, and another one would be depreciation cost. Okay, so when you buy a particular machinery, there would be a depreciation cost, no, that is attached to that machinery. So you incur them on a yearly basis. Okay, so that's the costs of production. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you have the revenue. Okay, so that is something that you earn. Okay, that's a monetary value. Now, for the data on marketing, what is commonly used or what is commonly collected, no, is the price data. Okay, so let us discuss this one by one. So what is farm gate price? Okay, the farm gate price is the point of first sale. Okay, so going back to the example, I am a farmer. I am a tomato farmer. So if I sell my tomatoes, for instance, at 10 pesos per kilogram, no, I sell it to a buyer or to a trader. So that 10 pesos per kilogram is your farm gate price. Okay, and then when the trader, no, buys that, no, that 10 pesos and sells that, for instance, no, at 20 pesos per kilo, no, to the retailers. So that would be the wholesale price, okay, of your tomato. Now the retailer, no, sells this product, this tomato, to consumers, let's say at 50 pesos. Okay, and since that is the end now of the chain, no, you sell it to consumers, that is now the retail price of the product, the point of last sale. So again, for just the terminology, farm gate price refers to the point of first sale rather, and then retail price refers to the point of last sale. So given these types of prices, you can actually compute, no, or arrive at a marketing margin. So for in understanding marketing margin, you have to be at a perspective, no, on a perspective of a trader. So for instance, I am a trader, no, of tomato, and if I bought tomato at 10 pesos per kilogram and then I sold it at 50 pesos per kilogram, so what is now my margin? That is now the difference between the selling price and my buying price. So in this scenario, the marketing margin is 40 pesos. You can observe that 40 pesos is quite large, right? But this is actually composed of not just profit, okay? Marketing margin is composed of two of two types. This is your marketing cost and your profit. Okay. Next slide. Okay, let's now go to the sources of data, no? Given those types of data that I presented, no, the data on production and marketing, now how do I collect these types of data? Okay, so there are the types of data according to source, no? And this is simply a question of who generated the data, okay? For instance, if I generated the data, I collected the data, that is, of course, primary data. Okay, that's simply primary data. Now, if I use the existing records, okay, let's say I go to the Philippine Statistics Authority, no, and collected the price data there, then that's secondary data. Now, for your primary data, you have two methods not to use. You have an objective method or a subjective method. The latter, the subjective method, is commonly used in agricultural and applied economics. So we conduct interviews. Later on, I'll expound on that, the focus group discussions, as well as key informant interviews. But let's talk about the objective method. So, okay, in collecting a primary data using objective method, you just have to remember that you have to use a measuring device. So for instance, it's very common now that when entering in a mall, there's a thermal scanner that you have to pass through. Your temperature must be checked first. Okay, so that temperature, that thermal scanner that you used, in measuring the temperature is actually a form, of an objective method, because you use a measuring device, in collecting the data. But now let's try to focus on the subjective method, the conduct of interviews. Next slide, please. Now, for this particular workshop, I'll be focusing on focus group discussions and KIIs, since this is very much applicable to your activities in your farm site planning and your feasibility study. Now, what is focus group discussion? Okay, so FGD has this salient features. Okay, the first feature is that it is controlled. Okay, there is a moderator, there is a facilitator that facilitates the discussion. Okay, and it is guided, since there are guide questions that are already formulated prior to the conduct of focus group discussion. So there's already at least an outline of the questions that you have to ask to your respondents. And it is it has also a characteristic of a small group. Okay, according to Kruger, the small group refers to 8 to 10 respondents. Okay, why is it not possible to have it on a large scale? Why is it not possible to have 15 respondents, okay, or 20 respondents for a focus group discussion? The reason is because you want to have an even participation. Okay, if there are more and more participants in your FGD, then the others, their marginal participation would be very, very small. Okay, but if you have the number of respondents from 8 to 10, you can at least expect an even participation. And of course, that comes with easier management, and it is also cost effective. Okay, FGD is not just a one for one purpose. Okay, it has many purpose, and the first one is that FGD is used as a preliminary step to staging larger quantitative research. Okay, another thing is that it can also be done simultaneously with quantitative research. Okay, FGDs help explain findings, let's say from a survey, since for a survey you have a large data set. Okay, a data set of at least 100, then it is hard to be able to extract it is hard to explain the mathematical values, no, that you arrive from surveys. And FGDs are helpful in actually supporting, no, the results of your survey, because you can directly ask the respondents, no, on why is the rating, no, why is your answer like that. So from that FGD, you can actually help explain the findings from your survey. And since you have a moderator, no, he or she can actually observe, no, the behavior of the respondents. So aside from seeing what they think, what the respondents think, no, we can also capture their behavior, no, how they think. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So FGDs have a wide variety of use in research, and I will give you two examples for this. No, FGDs are commonly used also, no, in product testing, no, in marketing practice. Okay. But here, no, we have an example here, the consumer purchase decision. Okay. So in this particular research, they actually had two sets of focus group discussion to be able to arrive at the attributes, no, both extrinsic and intrinsic, no, the attributes that they are looking for in both dragon fruit and guava. So with this FGD, they were able to list, no, the attributes that the respondents or the consumers are looking for. And it's very helpful before staging, no, a large scale qualitative or quantitative research, because for that particular FGD, you were able to determine the attributes, no. It is sort of a pre-testing of the questionnaire and adding the attributes that were not listed, no, by the researcher, because there are some attributes that you cannot be able to identify by the researcher only. So it is very helpful to ask your respondents about the attributes that they are looking for, no, in the focus group discussion. And in our research, no, I am one of the researcher for this particular study. What we did is to have an FGD side by side with the key informants interview, because in our FGD, our goal there is to identify the problems, no, that the farmers are facing, no, and sometimes you cannot ask that with the key informant interview, so you also capture that using the FGD, since it is a lengthy discussion. Next slide. Okay. Now, so for the key informant interviews, these are also qualitative, no? Comparing or looking at the FGD and KII, these are both qualitative, no, research. And it gives you the perception or the experiences of the experts in a particular industry. That is why it is called key informant, because that particular informant is notable, no, in his or her business or industry that he or she belongs to. And this is an in-depth interview of 15 to 35 individuals according to the University of Washington. And this is also inexpensive and easy, just like the FGDs. Okay. Next slide, please. Now let's proceed to the types of data according to nature. Now we are done with the sources of data. We are now able to know what is primary data, what is secondary data. Now we move, no, to the types of data according to nature. So by nature, you have qualitative and quantitative data. So when we talk about qualitative data, these are the labels, no, and categories, no, present. And for quantitative data, these are your meaningful numbers, okay? And when we talk about quantitative data, they are amenable to numeric interpretation, okay? Why did I say that? Because for qualitative data, you can actually attribute no a numeric code no for your categories. So let's say my example here is assigned sex at birth. Okay, so you have female and male. Now I can assign a category for that, a numeric code for that. So I can say that I can code male as 1 and 0 for female. So does that numeric code converts the qualitative data into quantitative data? The answer for that is no. Okay, you can assign numeric codes for your qualitative data, but it doesn't translate the qualitative data into quantitative data. The numeric code that I used is not amenable for numeric interpretation or mathematical operation. So for the first question that I listed here, are numeric codes considered quantitative data? So that answers this question, no. And for another question, can I convert qualitative to quantitative? Again, no. Converting that will not be amenable to numeric interpretation. What about quantitative data to qualitative? So for instance, I collected the farmer's income, okay? And then I wanted to group these farmers' income as low, okay, middle, and then high income groups for the farmers. Now, that conversion no, of quantitative data to numeric codes or labels no, transforms the data into qualitative data, okay? But however, no, one disadvantage of that is that you cannot anymore subject your quantitative data, original quantitative data, into numerical interpretation or mathematical operations, because that conversion downgrades your data no, from quanti to quali. So as much as possible, try to take advantage of the quantitative data that you were able to collect. Okay. But that's possible, na converting your data from quanti to quali. Now we proceed to the levels of measurement or scales of measurement. What I see here is a what you can see here is a ladder, some sort of a hierarchical form. Okay, because as you go up the ladder, no, the data has more use, no. As you go up the ladder, it makes the data quantitative, okay? So you have here at the lower ladder your qualitative data, and then your interval and ratio scale are both in quantitative data. So yeah, next slide, please. Okay, let's discuss these types of data according to scale. So for the nominal scale, again, these are your categorical variables. These are qualitative. They have no specific ordering, no specific ranking or preference. And one example of your nominal scale data is the dichotomous variables, okay? If you have a dichotomous variable, automatically it is a nominal data. Okay, an example of this would be the yes or no question, the questions of adequacy or satisfaction. Also, sex no, is an example of a dichotomous variable since you just have two responses. Okay, and again, just to note, numeric codes or labels have no meaning or order. So for instance, I code the types of trader as 1, 2, or 3. These numeric codes have no numerical interpretation. Next. Now for the ordinal scale, you just have another feature no, attached to the ordinal scale. So categorical variables can now be ranked in order. So my example here no, is the is a Likert scale no, from poor, below average, and then excellent. So there is a specific ranking to that. So poor no, is lower than the below average, and the excellent is the highest rank. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Now for the interval and ratio scale, these are both quantitative data, but the difference is just for interval scale. For interval scale, there is an absolute zero. So examples for this is the temperature that you collect as well as time. Now for the ratio scale, there are so many examples for this, but the most notable ones I included are price data, your production cost, and the marketing margin. These are also mentioned earlier. Next slide. Okay, now we move to the types of data, no, with respect to the time dimension. So if you collect one or more attributes, no, at one point in time, usually this is an example for your thesis, no, because you just collect the data in at one point in time. Okay, so that's a cross-sectional data. You collect one or more attributes or variables at one point in time. Okay, but if you try to collect an attribute at multiple points in time, now with equal intervals, now let's say weekly or monthly or daily, your data becomes time series. And then for panel data, these are several attributes observed at multiple points in time. So let's take a look at the examples. Okay. This is an infographic from the Department of Agriculture Regional Field Office. So what we have here, the variable of interest here is the price per kilogram live weight of hog, and that is collected for a single period, no, in time. So that's September, no, the price of hog in September. So that is a cross-sectional data. Next slide. Now, if you try to collect one attribute, let's say the farm gate price of palay, no, on a weekly basis, excuse me. So that is now a time series data because there are multiple time periods, and that a requirement for time series is that it is equally spaced, no, in time. So if your data is on a weekly basis, so that's a time series data. Also monthly and quarterly. So for time series data, you have four aspects, no? In your time series data, you have the trend. So you can see in your time series data if the trend is generally increasing or decreasing, or you cannot really see the trend. Another aspect of time series data is that it is cyclical and also seasonal. So for agricultural prices, you can see the seasonality, no, of the agricultural price, no, usually monthly, no, yung price difference, but also it can be observed, no, on a weekly basis, just like this particular time series data. And another aspect of time series data is the random variation, your external shocks. So for instance, a typhoon or a crisis like this, a pandemic. Okay, next. Next, please. Now, for the next slide, it would be the common problems, no, that you encounter when you collect data. Okay, so in the data collection process, let's say you employ secondary data collection. A problem that you usually encounter when collecting secondary data is that the data is incomplete. No, there are missing values in the data set. So one possible solution for this is that you impute values or ascribe values, no, to the missing data. But that would actually take time, no, in terms of learning. So that's another topic not to actually discuss. And let's now go to the common problems you encountered, no, when collecting primary data. Okay, so I listed here the possible errors that you can encounter when collecting primary data. So one example is coverage error, okay? So it occurs when the unit in the sample is incorrectly included or excluded. So an example for this is when you ask a municipal agriculture office no, of the list of farmers, and when you take a look at the list of farmers, some farmers aren't there. Okay, some farmers may not be producing that kind of commodity anymore. So one problem for that, no, in terms of primary data collection, is your coverage error. Another would be non-response error. That is the failure to obtain a response from a unit because of absence, non-contact, or refusal. An example of this is that when you go not to interview the respondents, and that particular respondent is a farmer and he is out there no doing doing farming. So that's an example no, of non-response, because you cannot contact the farmer because he or she is very far away no from you. Another would be refusal, okay? Since some of our information that we collect are really confidential, some respondents would really refuse to answer your questions. Another is response error, and that is caused by the respondents intentionally or accidentally providing inaccurate response. Now, how do we avoid response error? No, sometimes it's really hard to avoid because when respondents no intentionally provide you inaccurate answers, sometimes you don't know no that he or she is providing inaccurate answers. And lastly would be interviewer error. That would be the error on our part, on the researcher's part. So that are the common problems no, in primary data collection. Next slide, please. Now we're done no, on how to on what to acquire no, and where to acquire data. Now for the last two objectives, Tisha will be explaining that, but I guess we will be having a break. Kevin?
Yes, we will be having a short 5-minute break before we move on to the next topic. So thank you for that, Denver, and also for our fellows. If you have questions, and even our public guests, if you have questions, please comment down below. If you have any concerns about the topic and anything more under the sun, I mean under the moon, because it's already nighttime. So if you have questions, please comment down below. So we will be having a short 5-minute break just to have ourselves some. I know that's a lot of information to process. So
True.
let's have a 5-minute break.
Yes.
Waisili Summit in Phuket. And to the alumni in the audience, congratulations on your very impressive selection to participate in this summit, the capstone of the Waisili program. And I want to say thank you for your continued engagement and strengthening the relationship between the United States and also with Southeast Asia.
It's such a wonderful opportunity to bring these young leaders together to talk about sustainability, the theme for this year's ASEAN meetings. And one of the reasons we chose Phuket is because it is an example of what sustainability means.
This very strong sense of belonging with a lot of these folks that the Waisili team has brought together here at these conferences, and sort of sharing these core values for change and sort of be surrounded with like-minded people at the conference.
I learned a lot about how it means to be sustainability, how we could measure sustainable development, or how we could apply sustainable practices into our work and our study as well.
Exchange programs in the United States, regional workshops, a small grants competition, and events like the annual summit. And all of these activities really do is help to inspire and engage and empower with emerging young leaders across Southeast Asia.
And now we're back. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome back to the live stream. We are still with eConcepto with their data acquisition webinar. And we will have the second part of our webinar for tonight. But before that, while we're waiting for the others, because we're still 25, we are supposed to see 35 tonight because some people are coming in. So I will have to do a little bit of shout outs for those who are watching the live stream tonight. So firstly, let us call on Yvonne May Galvan. Hello. Kathlem Salem. Good evening. Cleve Nicole Fernandez. Zian Liu. Jig Pamplona. Shu Ching. Also, good evening to J. Kenneth Bahar Sernal. Sorry if I mispronounced it. Edmar Soriano Alfonso. Jig Pamplona, good evening to everyone. Good evening to you too. Katrina Diaz, good evening. Rosie V. Patino, Janine Vicente, Regine Patino, Jason R. Pukot, good evening. Eileen Henove, Bobby Ching, and then Alan B. Icardo. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. And it's 8 o'clock. And now let me introduce to you again our second speaker for tonight, who is the founder of Econcepto. Let's welcome Miss Tisha Evite. I think
Hi,
something.
good evening, everyone.
Is it working?
Yeah, I think I'm
Okay.
in.
Yeah. I think my
Okay.
camera's not. Yeah, okay, it's working.
So
Take it away.
okay. Denver already covered the first two objectives, and now we'll move on to the last two. So first is how to extract data. So we're sticking with the analogy that data is oil, and now after drilling, we need to extract it. So earlier, he covered the types of data according to source, and in discussing the primary data, we already mentioned the types of group discussions and interview formats you could facilitate for your farm site development. So what I have here is a diagram to further pick apart these sources of data. So it's important to note that each shade that we have here requires a different tool. So for the left part, mostly you'll need some knowledge in encoding the data. We already discussed also some ways to encode characteristics, assigning binary variables to make it easier for your enumerators or you later on. So I'll be focusing on the right part. So first is enterprise data. So if your business is a mobile or website application that collects data from your clients, your customers, that is also considered primary data. But since it is already stored in some database, the next step would be to load it in the platform of your choice, where you would be able to conduct further analysis. So the bottom right, on the other hand, consists of websites, statistical bulletins where the data that you need is already available. Someone else already did the collecting for you, but you would need some extraction or data manipulation, as we discussed before, to confirm to your preferred format. So first, enterprise analytics. So this allows you to get primary data from your clients, customers, without spending too much, as opposed to the costs associated to interviews, like transportation costs. And, on top of that, you only get to interview a sample of the population. So if your business operates in an application, you'll be able to get the whole picture and understand the market using that data. So some of the benefits in engaging in enterprise analytics are real-time data collection. And more than text, you'll be able to collect other file types, including images that your users upload, the audio, other documents uploaded, which you can analyze. But this depends on the user agreement that you or your organization sets out, to which the customer abides by. So other than that, there could be timestamps and maybe GPS data that allows you to track when and where the data is coming from, which can also be useful for your agri enterprise. But however, like other platforms, there are costs also. So there's a great investment attached to it. So usually companies have a dedicated department that supervises the data that is collected. And this is, consumed across the business. So perhaps you'd have data engineers that would deal with the database itself, doing the loading the data. And then you have analysts to identify patterns, perform other sorts of visualization that we tackled in the past. And, other business users such as you, your marketing team, your agribusiness sales team that would be able to study the data produced and allow your organization to capitalize on what the data is telling you. So some applications, since you'll be able to collect vast information in the application, such as buyer and seller's time on the device, their activities while using the platform. If you're an agricultural e-commerce platform, it can be used for various business goals. But on the other hand, you can also use it to track the performance of your own farm, improve other parts of the operation like plan crops and when to harvest, and check on other parts of the operation that might need a checkup, without having to go to the farm itself and perform on-site checkups. So especially if your offices are located outside the periphery of the farm. So in dealing with all of these, the main consideration again is the investment on a platform that will transfer data into a format that can be usable by you and other people in your business or your research. So one of the things you could do is to invest in a business intelligence platform like we discussed last Thursday. So its application is not only in visualization, as you will see here. So next part, we have open data portals. So these are distributors usually of data collected by different government agencies. So you could see it like as a one-stop shop for publicly available data. So that's the keyword there, freely available. So usually you'll have two options when you go to a site like this. So first is you could directly download the data, or use an API, application programming interface. But for this presentation, we'll go over the first option. So for our fellows and those tuning in, we'd love to hear if these types of databases are also available in your region. And, whether, let us know whether agricultural data has a fair share in the collected pool. So let us know if you're getting, less data than, let's say, ICT or other sectors, or if your country, is investing in collecting these and it's timely, we'd love to know that as well. So feel free to comment below. But I'll move on to direct downloads. How do we import data from open data portals? So when you choose to download a file from an open data portal, usually you'll have to deal with these data formats. So we have here CSV and TSV. So perhaps you already encountered the first if you're a researcher, or sometime in your college degree, you have downloaded this type of format. So both formats, it can be created and modified using spreadsheet software like Microsoft Excel. So in the text wizard, as you see there, in the text wizard of Excel, you can choose to define what delimits the data. So if the delimiter is a comma, so that's what Excel would use to split the cells with. So in the example we see here, I created a hypothetical columns here. So I selected comma, and now you see that the the variables below are previewed to be split now. So what is TSV on the other hand? So this is an alternative to the common CSV, because the CSV, it causes difficulties because what if you have a literal comma in your data set? So you'll have more columns, than intended. So the TSV is the alternative because, literal tab stops are, you don't quite often encounter this in text. So, but you can escape the comma actually by adding a backslash before it. But, it can be frustrating because not everyone follows these standards. So again, if your data doesn't contain commas, you can use CSVs. Otherwise, it might split the cells the wrong way. So, but one of the advantages of CSV is that it's more generic and You could use it to non-technical people because most software packages can read it without playing with the interface. So for example, if you load the CSV in Excel, sometimes you don't have to do this, what's in the screen. Sometimes it's loaded automatically and it's split already. So next type of data format you'll encounter is JSON. So you can disregard the JavaScript here because it's still being read across different programming languages. It has evolved to that. So as we'll discuss later on, databases have different programming languages, and there are restrictions into the types of files that they would accept. And that varies as well. So JSON here is a generic data format that can read strings, numbers, booleans, lists, objects, and even null. So yeah, data types in JSON are represented in all common programming languages. So it's a good candidate to transmit data despite the language gaps of different softwares. So the example here is a JSON format of a Facebook chat, actually. So different programming languages have their own functions to extract the values within these brackets and the main headers. So at first glance, you would see already the difference between a CSV and a JSON. So there are different preferences in the databases. So, but this is just like a heads up for you guys on what you can encounter when surfing through open data portals. So next is web scraping. So sometimes the data that you need can be available, but it cannot be directly imported as opposed to open data sites. And publications, some publications are open to repurposing the data for further research. But in these cases, let's say you want to compare your farm's pricing. If your pricing is competitive, you'd want to extract product details of other markets, or you want to get data, business contact details, lead generation for your marketing team. So an option might be, to go to a site, directly clicking it and pasting it to an Excel, but it may not come out as clean as you want, of course. So you may be taking on different headers, images that you don't need, and that could take a long time to clean, a long time to clean. So there's a more structured way of doing this, and that is web scraping here. So you could tag the parts of the websites actually that you wish to extract. And if you want to do this, there are softwares available online, but they usually come with a fee. So the other option is to code your way through it using open source programming languages that we mentioned last time. So there are lots to choose from, but if you want to be able to perform analysis or visualization from the language that you want to learn, you can opt to learn R or Python for this. So again, there's a steep learning curve, but you can keep in mind that you can apply what you learned in different aspects of data analytics, not just web scraping or you can apply it to other skills. So there's a note here, yes. So in most jurisdictions, web scraping is legal, but when you use copyright data, there may be some restrictions. So for that part, you guys would need to check it out yourselves. Just be cautious when trying to scrape data. So next part is we'll focus on cleaning, a bit about cleaning and storage. So first, but again, I'd just like to flag that these two things, they need a separate workshop in themselves. So we'll just go through it in passing. So first, I'll present the ideal data set. So this is after you acquire the data. So now how do you refine the oil that you have? So we have here the principle of tidy data. So we see here that looking at the first row of this table, we see that one planting material is equal to a 25-gram can, right? So we have 6 of those in our inventory. as dictated in the quantity column, and the price for each is 2,100. So the row here, the color blue here, is called an observation, or in Excel, it's called a record. And now, if we move forward, so that's the first principle. Observations are rows. Next is, looking at the second column, the yellow one, we see that different units per stock in the inventory, let's say this is an inventory, we have items measured in cans and in bags. So this column is called unit, you know. This column represents a variable, but in Excel, it's called fields. So in spreadsheets, it's called fields. And the individual cells below it, you know, what you see there, the entries are called values for this unit that is a variable. So we might call this table an inventory stock for our farm, for example. And this table is said to be an observational unit. So all entries in an ideal data set in a tidy table must pertain to items in our inventory stock. So that's the third principle, that in every table, there should just be one observational unit. So in summary, a data set is a collection of values. Each value belongs to a variable. Hello? Okay, I think I'm back. So I'll just continue. So this type of uniform structure is important because you would want to extract your tables in a standard way, right? So especially if you do format per inventory stock item, that's gonna be hard to do if the format isn't uniform. So I just want you guys to think about the principle of tidy data. So next, I'll give in passing some hurdles you might encounter, but again, data cleaning should be a separate session. So this is just like an overview or just a sneak peek of some problems. So next is, what if that's not the format? You know, what if the rows are it should be columns or vice versa? So luckily, Excel has a feature for that. So if you have a worksheet with data in columns that you need to rotate, to rearrange it in rows, you can use the transpose feature. So with it, you can quickly switch data from columns to rows or vice versa. So that's accessible through the paste options. You copy first the data and then you use paste special. So that's another thing. But again, there are many problems and there are more messier scenarios than this. So next, a last example of just a consideration is mismatch in data types. So you have to make sure that the data you encoded, may it be primary or something you imported online. For example, dates. You have to ensure that they are being treated as such. So sometimes you'd have numbers treated as text. You'd have dates treated as numbers and not as a time variable. So you'd have to check that, because otherwise you won't be able to perform analysis using that. So for example, I haven't checked if the date is treated as such. I cannot perform a time series analysis because the date is treated as a number. So Excel, maybe, you know, it can go crazy if that's the case. You might be presenting misleading values. So if you're eyeing to use programming languages such as R or Python, there are several packages that deal with these different cases of messy data. So I'll move on to the last part, which is data storage. So the question is, where should I put my data? What if we're just small? Should we invest in a larger database? So that's what we'll go through now. So first of all, before we talk about that, like what types of investments you should get, we should first differentiate flat files and relational databases. So when we say flat files, these are the types of files that you see that can be managed in Excel. So it contains a single table, it has records, fields, and values. So there is no referencing to another table. That's the main thing because that is the relational database. So relational databases contain multiple tables of data that relate to each other through special key fields. So for example, in this relational database, you would see that there are IDs that you can match with other tables. So for example, I have here, you have here users, first name, last name, and email. And then you have, in the ratings, you have user ID rating. So for example, someone wants to know all the ratings, let's say, that has been submitted by the database. You could query that because databases, if you write to a database, there is a language, you see. And then if you want to get something back, if you want a specific data set to be returned, you would need a query language to use that. So for example, you use SQL. So you could use SQL to identify just that, the question I raised. What is the user, what are the ratings submitted by this user? So what I could do is to select the username, create a filter for that. Let's say first name is Tisha. I'd have to filter that. But I want to match the ID of this user in the ratings table. So I'd have to match it with the user ID table. And then I abstract all the ratings from that. That could be your considerations. But so again, in summary, if you need to have referencing across multiple tables, a relational database is recommended. But this requires more upfront work because you would have to specify the schemas or the skeleton structure of the database. You'd have to do that first. You have to establish that first. So again, other considerations for that, I have it summarized in the next slide. So here you would see that in Excel, you could stay there if it's enough for you to just have your data stored in your local drives. But if you want to export external data sources, you could invest, in a DBMS. And then in terms of data integrity, Excel has data validation. So you could, that's the extent of its power. But in a DBMS, when you write to the database, you could have these, what do you call this? Perhaps data validation, the counterpart of data validation there in advance. Like you could specify it that it could not receive these types of data. So if you upload the CSV that doesn't conform to this format, it could automatically reject it. So that's a plus for DBMS in data integrity. So in data analysis, there are different tools available in Excel, and for DBMS, it's the same depending on what integrations are available in your bigger platform. And then in terms of multi-user collaboration, you could actually collaborate in Excel and the same way that you collaborate in Google spreadsheets. But however, you're editing in a direct copy. That's the thing to note. You're editing directly in the data, the raw data. But in a DBMS, as stated there, users access only a copy of the data. So for example, I want to do my own marketing research in my farm, let's say. I create my own visualization. I create my own analysis, exploratory data analysis. And I could do that without worrying that I'll mess up the raw data because I'm only editing a copy of it. So while you can do that in Excel or Google spreadsheets, you could literally just create a copy. However, if you do that, the data is not synced, right? So if you invest in a DBMS, it could be synced and you could give access to only a copy of the data. So in terms of security, yeah, there are also built-in restrictions in Excel, but in the DBMS, we'd like to highlight that it is saved continuously. So as opposed to, perhaps you guys already encountered problems in auto recover and the extent of that the extent of that feature. So another thing is this is actually for if you invest in a BI platform, there are group-based restrictions. So for example, you have a team that should only be viewing the operations data. You could limit it to that. So that's another thing because that also efficient, but it's not that flexible. So I guess that's it. So that's the main considerations whether you need if you want your firm or your team to stay in Excel or excuse me, or to upgrade. So in closing, if you guys want to dig deeper, we collated here some resources which you could go to, and we'll make available this presentation to Keb here to Tagani. So yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you for listening. And if you guys have questions again, or if you guys want to go back to the previous slides, just let me know.
All right. That was so great, Tisha. I mean, that was so comprehensive. Both of you guys, you have delivered it very well. Even me, I've learned something new. Every day I learn something new with you guys. So thank you for that. And I believe that if I've learned something new, of course, the fellows have also learned something new on their own. So with that, we are opening the questions to our audience, be it the fellows or that are watching via YouTube. And then the public who are watching via Facebook, Twitter, and then from other groups that we are live streaming on. So we have here a comment from Facebook user. I don't know the person's name. Probably this is from a group. I have accessed Open Data Philippines and clicked the agriculture and food security sector, but it says resource not found. Well, that's the common problem, right, Tisha, here in the Philippines?
Yeah. And sometimes if it's available, it's not really that accessible, like it's in PDF or not ready to be explored.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and that's why a lot of data analysts would be using Python for web scraping, because all of our data are usually in those kinds of formats that you have to do a lot of coding to derive those data, especially in Pag-asa. The data from Pag-asa, they are all in HTML, so they manually type it. So, do we have questions? We have a 10 to 20 seconds delay, so they might be still thinking of questions at the moment. But I have a question. My personal question is that, what were your during your first time of gathering data and then encoding these data towards a database or to a spreadsheet or whatever? How did it made you feel? Because I know that it can be overwhelming sometimes, and probably some of our fellows and some of our audiences might also feel the same way. So how do you make yourself not overwhelmed with because these are a lot of columns and rows of information and data. I mean data. So um, my question would be how would you be more ready to face on and use this data for your use, or how do you not feel overwhelmed? You're muted, Denver.
I'll go ahead first, right? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So for me, I guess in order for you to prepare no in terms of a huge data set, I guess you should be able to practice first, no, to be to explore more. Let's say for a you will encode the data in a spreadsheet, let's say Excel. So if you want to not be overwhelmed with the data, you have to explore the functionalities of Excel. You have to like for myself now, I'm basing it for my from my experiences. I always go to the YouTube videos no, for me to be um for me to learn no the different functionalities. No, I guess
Yeah.
that helped me a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think that's also a sound suggestion and advice, because every one of us who is in the world of data have used spreadsheets during their first year, and probably pen and paper when gathering data, and then you
Yes.
transferred it to spreadsheet and manually encoded it. And now we have some, OCR technology that allows them to automatically encode those data.
Mhm.
But again, you have to start with the basics first to not probably overwhelm yourself. But there are people, because as Tishab said, there's a steep learning curves, especially with Python, and people think that Python should be the way to go. It should be, you should shortcut. But sometimes, starting from the simplest would allow you to understand the whole system better, because when you skip steps, you tend to be overwhelmed, and that's what I think the Grow ASEAN Fellowship is all about. We have to, later on, we will have workshops from Microsoft Excel about functions, and then we will have Python and AI development, and then all of those kinds of ML. So it's really on a very smooth transition. Tisha, you have something to say? I'm so sorry. You were.
No, I just wanna say, can we attend the sessions?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but in my case, I haven't handled primary data yet, but from how I handled how not to be overwhelmed. I guess take it day by day. Like when I was new at my first job, and there are literally like thousands up to millions of data coming in every day. Um, I try to familiarize myself with the tables and the structure of the data that I commonly use. So, for example, I had the opportunity to take on a project that's to build a data dictionary. And I
Mm,
mean, that's massive, but the task also helped me, I mean, like forced me to learn, like, what do the tables mean? What
mhm.
do what is this type of data that's being taken by this column? And, I had someone to talk to the developers that wrote these themselves. So that's a good learning experience, and it also taught me the importance of documentation, because what if you're not there anymore in your enterprise, or someone's taking over your project? That's also a one way for them to not be overwhelmed. Give them documentation that they need. So
Mhm.
that's
Yeah,
my take on it.
documentation, and then for programmers, that would be in the form of also codes. I mean codes, comments, and then another part is the documentation, so that
Yes.
whenever it's a form of knowledge management, as we call it in technology management,
Version
right? So that,
histories, all that.
the history of why is it this field rather than this field, or why are you gathering this form of data? Because data management, aside from it being a science and a technology, it also is some form of an art. There is a sort of an art with it, the architecture of how you do your data. So there are a lot of things to consider, and as Tisha said, it would be really helpful to have your own dictionary of data. So we have your question from Shu Ching. Good evening. Is there recommended approaches to collect insight survey data effectively besides hard copy of questionnaire? Does anyone have an answer?
Mm, Uh, I can answer, Kevin. Okay. So in our for our in my experience, in my research experience, we actually used laptops. The laptops for encoding or tablets. It can be used not so that you can directly record your data.
Yeah, that's actually also this is very relevant right now, especially in COVID-19 pandemic. In the Philippines, they use of QR codes as forms
Yes.
for Google Forms, and a lot of form softwares have been scattering around. It's a matter of choosing your technology. And this is the reason why in Grow ASEAN we have discussed that technology is a culmination of all of the technologies and tools. So it's not just one form of technology. You have to really find your best suited technology for yourself for all your own use. So probably use whatever you are most comfortable with. That probably is, using Google Forms, or there's also an alternative technology with Microsoft that would be, the use of Microsoft Forms, such as in OneDrive, or another form, create your own on, I don't know, WordPress or any form of technology that you're using, so that after you are able to gather these kinds of information, you could probably get them and organize them and clean them after in a technology that you're acquainted with as well. Because again, it's a lot more of being acquainted with the technology than just getting the technology, getting the data. You have something to say, Tisha? I'm sorry, I keep cutting you off. Ah, hindi pala. It's because your internet connection is not working well. Hi, Tisha. Hello, Tisha.
Okay, I think I'm back. Hello?
Yeah. Hello?
I can hear you guys now. I'm back.
Oh, yeah. So,
Sorry
what
about
do you
that.
have to say about this? If you have a suggestion on collecting insight survey data.
Actually have no additional input. I think you guys covered it, but I think I'm so sorry. I think I got cut
Yeah.
again. I
Yeah,
have
you
an
were cut again.
question here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I probably just to add, I think they are also thinking about automation. There are ways on how we could automate data collection actually. For example, there's this method of data capture using Fitbits for animals. If you are in animal husbandry, you could stick up a microchip inside the animal so that you could probably get their temperature. This is more of the proximal sensing so that you will be able to get the data and then process it later. Meanwhile, if you are dealing with humans, of course, microchips would probably not be ethical. Although in some countries they're using it already. In China, they're using facial recognition to get the age, those kinds of ML technologies that they have been using. Probably this will be the future. I don't know. That's what's actually very frightening, that they could just get information from you using your face. So a lot of automation has been happening because of the progression of our technology. So it's really a matter of learning these kinds of technology as fast as you can. I guess that's also the good answer. We also have a question here from Benz Felices. What are ethical considerations in gathering data?
I guess Tisha can answer first.
Yeah, Tisha kaya answer this.
Okay. Thank you for this question. I guess of course standard would be like respect to people's privacy. If you need to anonymize the data, if it's sensitive data like we covered in the past, so I guess that also applies in data gathering, of course. Like if there's a specific, instruction from the participant to not disclose his or her name or any other sensitive data. And other than that, I'm thinking, of course, informed consent. And I think that's a standard everywhere now, but we have to still flag social experiments, I think, because sometimes there's this argument that if we gather informed consent, they would not behave the way they would behave if they didn't know that they were being observed. So there's this problem of external validity, what we call in social experiments. So I guess that's still open for debate. Do we allow skipping informed consent to get insights in these social experiments, or do we stay firm? We get informed consent in acquiring this data because it's for the general good. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Mm-hmm. Denver?
I just want to add no, to what Tisha said. We actually use numeric codes no, for that to maintain or to preserve the confidentiality of the answers no, of our respondents. So it is not just no, for encoding purposes. We code our data for it to be anonymized, okay, so that not all people handling that data can actually refer no to that person. This is her income, okay, this is the price that she's actually setting. So I guess it's really it's more of trying to preserve the confidentiality of data. And actually we also have to abide no legally abide with the Data Privacy Act of 2012. So it's really a requirement to ask for the consent of the respondent whenever you are conducting surveys.
Yeah. And just to add that, to add on to that as well, because in the context of the pandemic, we have been using codes in order to, make names out of the cases that are added every day. So even since the first one, we call them, but I don't know what's the code that they have been using, but they are using that to maintain the privacy of the person, because we know that we have to maintain data privacy, even though the data for the cases have been made public. I'm not sure if it's actually public because the government is trying to curtail the data. But anyway, it's still with data privacy. That's related to that. There are some ethical considerations with gathering data. So yeah, there are a lot of things to talk about regarding that. Okay, we also have a question from Zien Liu. What do you think about monetizing data exchange? Wow, very controversial topic again. Can we sell the data we collected as we have spent resources to collect it, or it's best to keep it publicly available for intellectuals to use? You can answer this both.
This is a tough one. I guess this is also open to debate. But when we say like selling data, like what firms are practicing is not actually selling our personal data. So that's also being masked. So I think the data that's being sold is our behavior, for example, in a specific platform. And this is sold in bulk. And like, for example, there are apps there that I'm not sure if you guys are familiar. There's an app that allows you to send in your receipts and you get a rebate. And then, so it's a good thing, right? Because you get money from your grocery list, as simple as that. But what they're actually doing is, they're compiling all these direct market behavior. It's so precise because it's your grocery list, it's your receipt. So they're selling this to third party and advertisement sites and other platforms. So I'm not I don't really have a strong opinion about it because that's how firms behave. But I guess it's a tool, you could use this data to further other research and solve other development problems. So that's the latter part. Make it available for public use. That's a good thing. But if we open it for that, we cannot also limit how others would use it. So
Denver?
Okay. Actually, Tisha answered that question on a businessman's perspective, no, on an enterprise or a firm level. But on the case, no, of a researcher, no, on the perspective of research, I guess, no, it cannot really be sold, no. Sometimes, no, we just have a sole purpose, let's say for academic research, okay, or if that is a project funded by the national government, then it is not really intended not for selling. It is for public use, public consumption.
Yeah. And also, I have to add to this probably, this is I think the crucial part of this is also reading the privacy policy so that you know what
Yeah.
kind of data they are selling. Because if you are not paying for any platform, they are most probably selling your data. And be it in a bulk or in a personal level, we don't know. So you probably have to read really the privacy policy and the terms and conditions that is attached to that, so that you know what are those data that they are getting from you, and that what are those that they are selling to, so that you know what you should not probably, if you are so careful about your privacy, you will not put those kinds of data. You'd probably delete your cookies every now and then, or cache or whatever, and not involve a lot of your data. And I think that, but the common practice of all of us is we don't read privacy policies. That's a long documentation, and I think at the end of the day, it's also in the
check.
legality of things, right, Tisha? You have something?
No,
Yeah,
yeah,
in the
I was just echoing how we would just check the terms and conditions.
yeah, and it's in the legality of things that there are different definitions of how they monetize things. So for example, yeah, as Tisha said, in advertisement, or probably in the form of raw data without your name. So it's a matter of gauging the risk of how much privacy you're trying to share through the platform, because all platforms are data mining um, platforms, at least in my perspective. They all gather data in one way or another. Even GrowASEAN gathers
I guess
data.
I'd
So
like to, sorry.
yeah, Tisha, go.
I'd like to add what you could also use as a benchmark is that if these firms actually share the data they collect with you, that's a good thing because they're transparent of what you collect. I mean, other than having it in the fine print, of terms and conditions, that means, they have these trails, and it's available for you and you can retract it at any time and, ask them about it.
And that's actually a good way to look at it, because a good organization that values your data, they allow the retrieval and deletion of your data, right? So that's a good thing, because that's actually mandated by law, at least in the Philippines. I'm not sure with other countries, but the retrieval and then deletion, if you want to have them deleted right away, you could have them deleted. So anything more? Okay, do we still have questions? Please comment down below. We still have 2 minutes, so make your comments count, because we will be ending this live stream in a bit. So this has been very fun as a discussion, and we unfortunately Tisha is not on Facebook, so I cannot add you on our Facebook group, right? Tisha, are you now on Facebook? Not yet.
Hello, Tisha.
I have a dummy.
You have a dummy, because
Yeah.
because all of the discussions for GrowASEAN is in Facebook. So I'm actually, so to discuss data privacy, I was also about to delete my Facebook, but I realized that my work revolves around Facebook. I'm a social media manager, so I cannot just delete my Facebook.
Same.
When my Facebook account got deleted because of I don't know what happened, my life changed because I'm not reliant to Facebook anymore. Just that. I have here
Yeah, that's
another
a good thing.
question from Rosie V. Patino. What are effective ways to encourage the target audience to, very good question, to participate in data gathering, especially those with low attention span like me? I have ADHD. So what do you have suggestions for that?
I
Form
guess
fatigue,
I
right?
think then this one.
I guess the researcher or the interviewer should be more enthusiastic so that the respondent will be more attentive. Of course, it also depends on the way the interviewer asks the questions. So it's really important. No, sometimes it is also essential to practice the way you ask, the manner of asking the respondent, and also trying to explain the project first, or the research first, so that the participant is actually the participant actually has that knowledge that he or she has to participate in that particular interview.
Yeah. Tisha?
No, I just like to echo that because it's important to see the bigger picture. Like, I think in any task, like if you're reduced to this one thing, and that's as little as, could be this participating in an interview, it would give you more, motivation if you know what is it for, like what's at stake at large, essentially.
Mhm. Yeah, actually. So to add on to that, there are a lot of ways on how you could possibly motivate people. And a lot of people are actually trying unethical ways on how to motivate people, such as, for example, Face app who was able to gather a lot of face data from us, right? That's a way to motivate people, like, the social trends and all of that. So, the participation of people, they were able to get that. There are also a lot of ways such as, it's more of you being a communicator as well. So a data researcher, a data scientist, a lot of it also has to do with art, the communication, the way you communicate with your target audience. It's you have to be a whole being for you to be able to be more efficient as a researcher and an analyst in general. So we don't have necessarily a good answer to that because it's also a challenge in our end. I guess that's the good answer. So it depends. So it depends. So, well, if you're talking about with people with low attention span, such as we as people with attention deficit, it's more of designing it on their way. It's more of design thinking. So that's why we also have the session about design thinking. You have to put yourselves into the shoes of who you are asking to. And that's the empathy part. Why are they like that? Why do they have short attention span? What would keep them in the attention? So it's really more on the empathy because the person's attention and motivation is different from another. You can't create a trend. You can't create a generalization out of every people, especially if it's very low of a number, less than 25. It won't be able to create a trend on what's the best way. So you have to treat each people as separate strategies or tactics. Okay, I guess that's the end of. We don't have any more questions. There was a very good discussion with you, Tisha and Denver. Again, thank you for being part of Grow ASEAN. And as you requested, we are going to give you credentials for the next parts of the webinar, just like all of our previous lecturers here in Grow ASEAN. So thank you again. Anything to say
Thank
to
you.
the fellows or to our audience?
I guess good luck to your capstone, and we hope this was helpful. I hope you guys could connect our sessions with the other previous learning you got from your mentors in spatial data analysis and other. Yeah, I wish this was helpful to you guys.
Denver?
I guess that's also my that's what I want to say. Good luck on your farm side planning. I hope it will also help, no, our discussion for tonight also help you in a way, no, on how you can collect both primary and secondary data.
All right. Thank you so much, Tisha, again, and Tisha and Denver for being part of Grow ASEAN. Thank you so much for watching our webinar on data acquisition, and we won't have any more webinars for the coming months because every all of the webinars will be asynchronous, so it will be sponsored by Microsoft and other sponsors. So again, thank you so much. Probably the next live webinar would be in November. So thank you again. This is Mika Cuevas, founder and CEO of Tagani Philippines and Executive Director of the ASEAN Digital Agriculture Association. Till next time here on Grow ASEAN, bye and have a great night.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Bye.